on October 29th of a year that's irrelevant, I was born in a small town in South Georgia, about 2.5 hours southwest of Atlanta. I entered this world as Ana Maria Garcia. And almost from the very beginning of my life, got off to a pretty rough start, and a good amount of my early years were spent in and out of foster care. I was moving back and forth between my foster family and my birth family, and I had a difficult time rationalizing and understanding a lot of the things that were happening to me at that time. As I got older, I recognized I wasn't just moving back and forth between two different families. I was moving back and forth between two different worlds, two different realities. One week, I had my very own room with a pretty pink canopy bed that I got to sleep in all by myself. And then the next week, I was sharing a bed with at least one sibling, and there were 3 to 4 of us to a room. For everything that my birth family wasn't, they were my family. When I looked at them, I saw me. I saw somebody who looked like me, talked like me, had the same facial expressions and hand mannerisms that I did. They were comfortable. I felt normal when I was with them. The other half of my time I spent with a whole other family, a family that loved me, cherished me, showered me with love and affection, spared no expense when it came to letting me try sports and activities, up to and including horseback riding lessons, which, by the way, did not end well for me. They helped me do things like my homework. And for the first time, I had a parent who came to parent-teacher conferences. Now, that excitement quickly dwindled. But they made sure that I graduated high school and that I went to college. We, too, were a family. The back and forth would continue up until the summer before my 8th grade year, and I was adopted by the Morris family. Now, here's something you should know about the Morris family. They raised 4 biological children. During their time as foster parents, they fostered 65 children. They adopted 2, and unofficially adopted 2 more. Obviously, they were crazy. So during this back and forth and this history, I left out something that you may perceive to be an insignificant piece of information. My adopted parents are white. Now, some of you may be thinking, what does that have anything to do with your ability to love a child? What does race have to do with that? And the simple answer is, it doesn't. Growing up, I felt isolated and alone. I recognized from a very early age that I didn't fit into the mold. I was the thing that stood out. Growing up, we didn't talk about race. We didn't talk about what that was going to look like for me growing up. We didn't talk about those things. We just pretended that they weren't there. We didn't discuss what to do, what to say, how to respond to situations that would and eventually did happen. I remember being in the 4th grade, and we were in class, and the teacher was talking to us about all of the great careers that we would have. And she was naming students that would be teachers, and she was naming students that would be lawyers. She was naming students that would go on to do great things. And she looked at me and she said, and some of us will clean houses. And I didn't know how to respond to that. I was completely unprepared. I didn't understand stereotypes at that time. But that doesn't mean the cruelty of her words didn't hurt or sting any less. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be the first time that I had to just pretend something awful hadn't just happened. I remember being in the 8th grade, shortly after my adoption was final. There was a school dance, and I really wanted to go. So I had a friend that was a guy, and we were on the phone one day. We were talking, and I asked him, I said, hey, do you want to go to the dance with me, like just as friends? And he later would admit to me in that conversation that he couldn't go to the dance with me because I wasn't white. He couldn't go to the dance with me because I wasn't white. And I felt so embarrassed and ashamed. And I didn't know how to respond to that situation. I didn't know what to say to him. So in true 8th grade awkward fashion, I just said, okay, bye, and I hung up the phone. Because I didn't know how to follow that up with anything. And I didn't know how to have those conversations with my very white parents because we didn't talk about those things. Because God forbid, what if they said they understood his position? I know now that that would have not been the case. But then, I didn't understand that. Growing up, I recognized those obvious physical differences. I wanted so bad to just fit into their world. Every aspect of my life made me feel isolated, whether it was at church or whether it was at school or whether it was in a sporting activity. No one looked like me. At that time, church was a very big part of our life. We spent 3 or 4 days a week at church. At that time, the church that we attended was pretty much an all-white church, and the youth group was all white. And I didn't feel like even in that space that I was 100% comfortable because it was their space, and I just was allowed to access it because of my parents. That's how it felt. And as I got older, that need to fit in grew, that need to just be like everybody else. Because it was almost an impossible thing to forget. Because every time you walked into a store or a restaurant, you would get looks, and you could see the confusion on people's face. It was very obvious. Like, how does that, you could see it. So I just wanted to fix it. I just wanted to fix myself. The first time I tried to fix myself was when I was about 6 years old. I had an older sister, and she had beautiful skin, beautiful fair skin. And I wanted to look like that. And I watched her put on her makeup, and she had one of those, classic green CoverGirl compacts, from the early 90s. And so I sat on the floor in front of her dresser, and I proceeded to cover myself head to toe in that powder. Because then I would have pretty white skin like her. Because 6-year-old logic is flawless, And my mom found me covered in this white powder, and she scolded me for playing in my sister's makeup, as she should have. But that was it. That was the takeaway. Don't play in your sister's makeup. That need to fit grew and grew the older that I got. And I did things like cut and dye my long black hair, and I added big chunky blonde highlights. I did things like cover my beautiful brown eyes with blue-colored contacts. I went so far as to pretending that I didn't speak Spanish. I pretended that I didn't even understand it. I'm just like you. I went so far as to when I was adopted, I went from Ana Maria Garcia to Annie Catherine Morris. I changed everything that I possibly could about myself to fit into what was essentially their world. Now, after years of introspection, after years of some self-destructive behaviors, I finally asked my parents, why did we pretend like I wasn't struggling with these issues? Why did we pretend that I just didn't have all of these emotions going on? And my mom said, well, I don't think I knew what that looked like then. I don't think I knew how to recognize that. And even if I had, I don't know that I would have known how to deal with it. We just wanted to raise you like you were just one of our other kids. We loved you just the same. You were just a little darker. So back to that question. What does race have anything to do with someone's ability to love their child? It doesn't have anything to do with your ability to love your child. It has everything to do with your ability to see their color and to recognize how that will play a role in their life. Some of us don't have the benefit of pretending that this exquisite accessory that we call skin color doesn't play a role in our everyday lives. At best, this colorblind theory was one that just didn't benefit all of us. At worst, people used it as a tool to silence our grief and our pain, and in some cases, to gaslight us. Even as an adult now, I find myself in situations where I'm often the only person of color somewhere. And if I'm being completely honest with you, it can still be incredibly uncomfortable sometimes. But fortunately for me, I'm an adult. I have the language to understand these complex feelings and emotions, and I'm able to remove myself from a situation if I see so fit. So in the spirit of all honesty and transparency, I don't have all the answers for you today here. I can't give you a manual on how to deal with these situations. But what would you have said to that 6-year-old girl covered in white powder? What would you have said to that 4th grader so full of hope before it was just viciously stomped on? What would you have said to that girl that was about to permanently alter the very fabric of her identity by changing something that was so much more than just a name? All of my experiences have led me to this moment, to this stage. Even the ugly parts. I've learned to accept all parts of me, even the parts I never actually needed. I've learned to love and accept both Ana Maria and Annie in equal parts. I think my experiences have made me a better mother, a better advocate, a better person. The one that I take away most from that is I'm a better mother. I'm raising children to love and embrace the gift of their melanin. I'm raising children to love the color of their skin, the music that is our language. I'm raising them to love their beautiful brown eyes and the texture of their hair. There's a certain amount of confidence that comes with true self-love, a certain amount of success that comes with that when you're really confident about yourself. And I want that. I want that for my kids. I want that for your kids. So how do we get there? How do we get that for all of our children? I think that it starts with some really tough conversations with our kids. I think we need to be able to open those dialogues with them. I think that it also starts with some really tough conversations with ourselves. If we ever have a hope for a better tomorrow for them, we need to be ready and willing to have those conversations. We need to start those conversations today, now. Thank you.